So the first finish we're going to learn about is the Tru-Oil finish. It is this product. It goes on very thin, yet it is very, very easy to apply. That's why a lot of people like it. I'm going to be showing you the way to do a satin version of it, but it is possible to do a full gloss version with Tru-Oil as well. Because Tru-Oil goes on so thin, I like to have things really well sanded. You don't have much filler per se. Like when you spray a nitrocellulose finish, a little bit of that is going to fill any cracks or anything like, not cracks, any sanding scratches and whatnot, and it will actually help hide them. That's why we only go up to about 320 with those kind of finishes like nitrocellulose. But with something like Tru-Oil, you don't have as much filling capacity. So I like to sand everything higher for a Tru-Oil finish. Minimum 400. I like to go to 600. But we are actually going to also have to pore fill. So the difference between the sanding scratches and the pore filling, you might ask, is sanding scratches, you do need them level with the rest of the surface or else you'll see them. But the interesting thing about sanding scratches is that when you spray a finish on them and level, they'll actually disappear. Whereas when you go and do a pore fill, which we're about to do, this method, it would actually highlight the scratches because we're leaving little bits of the wood mixed with the Tru-Oil as pore filler. So it's kind of pore highlighter, and so it would also technically be scratch highlighter. That's just another reason why for this method I like to go up a little higher than usual. Fairly simple. We're just going to take a sanding block, and I'm going to show you on this test piece because I've already done this on the guitar. But we're going to take a sanding block, some 600 grit paper, and some Tru-Oil, and literally I'm just going to apply some of that Tru-Oil to the wood, and just like any other sanding operation, we are going to sand with the grain. And what this is doing is, even though this is fairly fine sandpaper, you see it's got some schmutz that it's leaving. It's a mixture of that fine sanding dust and the Tru-Oil, and that's actually going to go about filling those pores. So I would go over the whole entire body like this, and then I would actually let that go ahead and dry a little bit, not fully. Once it's dried, I'm actually going to come back with some 600 again, but without the Tru-Oil, and I would level sand everything flat just to make sure that there's nothing sitting above the surface. It's only in the pores. Keep in mind that you may need more than one application of this, but that will all depend on whether you can actually see if the pores are filled, and I'll generally just kind of hold it up to a light, and that's generally a good way to see if there's actually stuff in the pores. It's really hard to explain on video. You'll have to try it. But once we have filled, sanded with 600 again, it's good to go into the next step of the process of applying the coats. So let's talk about making your pad for the application of Tru-Oil. It's going to require two things. I just take an old beat up t-shirt and I'll cut a little square out of it. Basically any lint-free cloth, and I'm going to make sure it's lint-free at the edges because sometimes cutting this will get stuff. And we're also going to use a little paper towel. And when I say little, I literally mean a little. So I'm just cut that in half, and then I'm going to cut this in half, so about a quarter of a sheet, and I'm just going to create a ball with it. And then that ball is going to go into the center of the cloth to make a little pad that you can hang on to, dip in Tru-Oil, and then apply. The reason I do it like this is I used to do it with just paper towel, and I'd get little, no matter what you did, you'd get little tiny bits of paper here and there in your finish. So having a lint-free rag helps with that. But the bad part is with the drying oil, this thing's not really reusable, so you don't want to use anything like expensive. You don't want to make yourself a really nice one. So that's why I just use beat up shirt and a little paper towel, because everything's disposable here when I'm done, because drying oil, it's going to dry on it. This is going to remain hard, and pretty much I find that they're good for about one application. To apply the Tru-Oil, I use a glove. It's really sticky stuff. To my knowledge, it's not dangerous, but it is kind of annoying when it gets on your hands. It's really, really sticky. I'm just going to take a little bit and apply it to my pad. And then I'm literally going to go around in circles. And I'm applying pressure. So by the time you are done with a coat, your arm should hurt a little bit. It's just like French polish. The reason for doing this is a lot of people follow the instructions on the back that says just to kind of smear it on there and whatnot, and I don't find that works well. The reason I don't like that is a lot of people will follow the instructions on the Tru-Oil bottle to a T. They'll just kind of wipe it on without any pressure or circular motion. It's kind of a wipe on, wipe off sort of exercise. The reason I don't like that is because Tru-Oil goes on extremely thin, no matter how you do it. It's just the nature of the beast. And I found that just wiping it on doesn't leave you a smooth enough surface, so you'll have to go back there and do a lot more level sanding than you will doing this French polish style. The problem with level sanding Tru-Oil is, once again, it's very, very thin, so you don't get much leveling ability before you go through it. So I would prefer to just put it on nice, thin, but even at the start than to have to come back and mess with it later. So that is why we were painstakingly polishing it onto the guitar instead of just slathering on and wiping off. And I will do this exactly the same for all parts of the guitar. Neck, back, top, sides, whatever. This is how I will go about it. And I'm going to put about 12 coats like this on total over a couple of days. And one thing I've found helps, if you look at angles and light and stuff, you'll be able to see where it's going on a little thick, or especially in areas like this where you can't really polish out. It's important to kind of come in there and sop up a little bit of that extra if there's extra sitting around. One thing that I have found that you should probably look out for is on very sharp edges, so like where the side of the headstock meets the top of the headstock. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do the sides first, because I can't really do a swirly motion, so I'm just kind of applying pressure as I go back and forth. But what that's doing is it's squeezing oil out of my pad, and not only depositing on the side, but it's also depositing it on the face of the headstock. So right on the edges, there's now a glob of Tru-Oil. And that's why I do the sides before I do the top and back of very sharp angles like that. Because now I'm going to go in and I'm going to polish the top, which is going to make sure that I don't have these globs on the side. Although Tru-Oil does go on thin, when you get those globs, they will remain relatively globs. They'll get smaller as it dries, but you will not have a flat finish, and they are going to be difficult to get out easily and cleanly, in my experience. Your final step with each coat is to take apart your pad. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to leave it to dry fully unfolded. So one interesting thing about drying oils, I'm going to see if I can do this with one hand. One interesting thing about drying oils is that they will actually heat up as they dry. And so if you keep things really balled up and folded and compacted, it'll actually build a decent amount of heat, and although rare, things have been known to spontaneously combust with drying oils. So I'll just leave them there overnight, and they'll get hard, and I'll just throw them away. Since I'm going to be doing a satin Tru-Oil finish on this guitar. My last stage is to take some it's synthetic steel wool. It comes in a couple different grits. So I used the gray grit, but they also have an extra fine, I think it's called fine. They also have an extra fine white, and then they also have a red and a green, which get coarser, so medium and coarse. But I find that the gray is good for my purposes. It's relatively equivalent to Quad-O steel wool. And I'm going to show you what I'm trying to get rid of. So the process that we've been doing, I don't know if you can see this, I'm going to try and get it so the light catches a little. See how it's got almost like some swirl pattern in the finish? So that's left by obviously the swirling action we've done during the process. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my steel wool, I'm going to pick a good spot to show you guys, and I'm just going to dull this out, and it's also going to flatten it as I go. And since the Tru-Oil goes on fairly thin, as you'll see, it fairly quickly, see, there you have swirl and no swirl. So this whole area now that I just hit is swirl free, looks nice and uniformly matte. If you wanted to keep a high gloss finish, I haven't done it, but everything tells me you should probably be able to do a very high grit level sand. Like I said, Tru-Oil goes on very thin. This Quad-O steel wool equivalent, synthetic steel wool, is flattening. So very, very high grit level sand, and then buff if you want to buff out your Tru-Oil finishes, I'd imagine. But I've only ever done satin, and that's how I do them. I'm getting to this stage after about 12 coats. So just to go through everything again, we did the pore fill, and then I did 12 coats, no more than 3 a day, with 2 hours at least in between each of them. And then about halfway through the whole process, I did a high level grit. I think it was 800 or 600 level sand. Once again, too much grit on Tru-Oil and you're just going to go right through the stuff because it's a very thin, natural feeling finish. But I'm going to go and steel wool the rest of this, and that is actually all I'm going to do for this finish.